Welcome back. You're watching France 24. Coming up, France to tighten COVID restrictions in hardest hit areas, including Paris. Among the measures touted, a ban on alcohol sales after 8 p.m. and no private gatherings of more than 10 people. Donald Trump to pay his respects Thursday to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This as the battle over the nomination of the progressive icon's successor brews. Ginsburg's body lying in state at the U.S. Supreme Court. A mandatory week off for French fathers to spend with their newborns, part of a proposed bill to double paternity leave from 14 to 18 days. After the news, it'll be the France 24 debate. Will it be second time lucky for fixing the EU's broken migrant policy? The new commission unveiling its plan this Wednesday to relieve the burden on the likes of Italy and Greece, 2 weeks after the blazes that gutted Lesbos' Moria refugee camp. What to make, most notably, of the idea of getting financial contributions from countries that don't want to take in more migrants. Tell us what you think on Facebook and Twitter. The hashtag F24debate. Super red, scarlet red, the French health minister expected to unveil new color coding to raise the country's COVID alert level. New notches that would fall just shy of a return to full lockdown. This as the number of back-to-school cases of coronavirus since the start of the month has been high, with COVID responsible for 20% of the hospitalizations in the Paris area. Wasim Kolne has more.
As the number of COVID-19 hospital admissions continues to rise in France, authorities are getting ready to issue a new set of restrictions for several of the country's major cities. Until now, the Ministry of Health had regularly updated a map of France showing regions with high levels of contamination or red zones. But the growing number of coronavirus cases means the government will likely place several large cities in the super red or scarlet categories.
Super red means that all the hospitals will be on duty and on call 24 hours over 24 hours, and that is to be able to respond to the potential wave of new patients that will require intensive care.
Although the super red and scarlet levels are already an integral part of government plans in mass casualty events, authorities hope these categories will alert citizens about the rising number of COVID-19 cases and hospital admissions. French newspapers are also reporting that the government is working on a slew of new measures that would take effect in areas that are seeing high numbers of new cases. Those may vary from city to city, but they include a possible ban on alcohol sales after 8 p.m., lower limits for the number of people taking part in social gatherings and large events, and a possible ban on community centers and halls being used as wedding venues. Over the past 7 days, more than 4,000 people have been hospitalized across the country. 650 people were admitted to intensive care.
In Washington, the day began with a private ceremony in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court to honor late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The progressive icon passed away last Friday at 87, prompting a fiery battle over the naming of her successor so close to Election Day. After the ceremony, Ginsburg's flag-draped casket was placed at the top of the court's front steps so the public could pay its respects. More from Karis Garland.
Making her final trip to the Supreme Court, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg will lie in repose where she served for 27 years. After a private ceremony with the remaining 8 justices, thousands are expected to pay tribute to Ginsburg, her casket placed outside for public viewing until Thursday evening.
I'm here because Justice Ginsburg was my hero. She was the reason that I am an attorney today. I mean, if she hadn't done what she did for gender equality, I don't believe that I would be an attorney.
So many of the things that we take for granted as women and people, she was instrumental in providing. So that's really why we felt like we had to be here.
But as a somber mood falls over the Supreme Court, controversy surrounding Ginsburg's replacement continues. Fearing a Conservative advantage in the court, Democrats demand a new justice be chosen only after the November 3 presidential election. But President Donald Trump said he would announce his pick for the job on Saturday evening.
And now we're going to pick a great woman, any one of the five that I told you, but any one of the women that we had, they're all great people, great scholars, great, brilliant people.
During Wednesday's ceremony, Chief Justice John Roberts remembered his colleague as tough and brave, saying Ginsburg's opinions and famous dissents would steer the court for decades. On Friday, Ginsburg will lie in state at the Capitol, the first woman to do so.
At least 380 whales have died in Tasmania. Pilot whales that washed up on the shores south of the Australian mainland. Scientists are talking about it as rescuers are struggling in freezing waters to free those that are still alive. Peter O'Brien has more.
It's a depressing sight. A pod of pilot whales, some 500 strong, trapped on the western shore of Tasmania. Despite 2 days of a difficult and dangerous rescue attempt, most are already dead, and only a few dozen have been freed. Conservationists say it's worth the effort. The ones who make it out will thrive in the wild.
Our focus is obviously on the rescue of live individuals at the moment. In the back of our minds is always what happened here. Typically, we don't get any answers.
Although we don't know why mass beachings happen, one key factor appears to be the whales' tight social cohesion. The bond between them is so strong that even once rescued, many turn around and beach themselves again.
The reasons potentially might be is because they're wanting to return back to the pod. They might hear the acoustics or the vocalizations or the sounds that the others are making, or they're just disorientated, in this case, extremely stressed and just probably so fatigued that they, in some cases, don't know where they are.
Pilot whales weigh over 1,000 kilograms each, meaning that once they've hit the sand, they can't lift themselves off again.
When France first instituted paternity leave in 2002, it was hailed as a maverick move. Now critics say the country has fallen behind the times, with other countries' support for families surpassing them. So it's not just mothers who are forced to take career breaks to care for newborns. So the president's announced plans for a doubling of paternity leave from 14 to 28 days. One of those weeks would be mandatory for new dads. Andrew Hillier has more.
Isor, born 2 days ago, is this Parisian couple's first baby. Her dad took all 14 days of paternity leave available to him.
C'est un temps qui est nécessaire. On a besoin de prendre du temps pour s'occuper d'eux.
Next year, France's paternity leave allowance is set to double from 14 to 28 days. 25 days will be covered by health insurance, whilst employers will pick up the bill for the other 3. Good news for this mum.
Ça va aider énormément les mamans à être secondées et puis surtout au papa de pouvoir prendre vraiment sa place au sein du couple, au sein de la famille.
This dad knows how important that time is to bonding with children. Tal, his daughter, was born in June. His company gave him 5 weeks of paternity leave, a generous allowance well over the 14 days set aside in law.
Il vous faut ce temps-là pour aborder la paternité ou la parentalité. Je veux dire, c'est un chamboulement à tout point de vue. Plus de temps vous avez à consacrer à votre famille, plus c'est bénéfique.
Paternity leave is optional in France, and not everyone takes advantage. 80% of those on permanent contracts, known as CDIs, take leave, compared to 40% of those on temporary contracts, called CDDs, and just 13% of those looking for work. As a result, the government is planning to oblige fathers to take at least 7 days of the allowance, a move announced by President Macron.
Nous allons porter le congé paternité à 1 mois. 1 mois au sein desquels il y aura 7 jours obligatoires pour chaque jeune papa.
Lawmakers are expected to hold a vote on the legislation next year, with the law expected to come into force around July.